Welcome to the Oneal Perspective, Politics, Power, and Policy, where we break down the latest in politics, dive deep into forces shaping our society, and uncover the policies that will make it all happen. Your host, Curtis Oneal, is here to educate, enlighten, and entertain as we explore the world of politics with clarity and insight. Whether you're a political junkie or just trying to be informed, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome, family, and welcome to one of the first podcasts for the Oneal Perspective, where we talk about politics, policy, and power in this particular podcast. Today, we have my good friend, Elvin Caldwell, who is a political lobbyist and also a former candidate for the city of Lansing city council. So, Elvin, it's good to see you, man.
Good to see you too, Curtis.
man, you always come in styling, man. I like the hat, man. And so there's a lot that's been going on here lately in the world of politics.
That's right.
And I wanted to try to unpack some of that with you today. A lot of it is, of course, around this whole new administration, right?
Absolutely.
And then some of that, of course, was going on with the previous administration, with the Biden-Harris administration. But we won't talk about that right now. We will talk a little bit about the new administration. So I want to sort of talk about a couple of things, and hopefully we'll have the time to have that robust, fruitful discussion. I want to sort of unpack with you a little bit around the conversation around immigration. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that's going on there. It has a lot of people sort of confused, angry, upset. And so I want to be able to do that, talk a little bit about DEI, right? I think that's important too, because a lot of communities of color are also feeling kind of nerved by that, especially with this new particular administration. And then one of the things I like for us to do is be able to dive into some of the local state stuff that's going on here in Lansing and in Michigan. So we have a lot. So let's go ahead and just sort of talk about it right now. So with regards to immigration, right? We see that ICE is cracking down a lot right now in major cities, sanctuary cities. We see that Tom Homan, who is now the border czar that Trump had appointed for cracking down on this immigration. And then, of course, Kristi Noem, who is now his new Department of Homeland Security secretary. They're going in. They're going into these towns. They're going into Chicago. They're going into Aurora, New York. And a lot of people are again, confused and upset. So what's your take on some of this?
Definitely. It's sad to see the family split up. It's sad to see people lose businesses accustomed to a way of life and have it changed up so drastically. So I can understand the confusion, dismay, and all of that comes with, uprooting someone who's been here for some time, regardless of the circumstance. When it comes to Holman and the activity in the major cities, it's part of the political battle. We saw when Governor Abbott first started sending migrants to sanctuary cities or to cities that are not on the southern border, bringing the politics of the border kind of to the Midwest or to different regions of the country. It had a palpable effect. You see what's going on in Chicago, Denver, New York, some of the places you already mentioned. And so I can definitely see how when this administration comes in, it's a sweeping order. It's pretty clear direction in how they're moving. Whereas in the last administration, you saw a little bit of ebb and flow when it came to immigration and immigration policy. But with this sweeping order and Holman's activity and the aggressive nature of it, it's one of the unfortunate results of or consequences of losing the election. Being that we ran as Democrats, we ran heavy on immigration, and I don't know if it was the exact specific nature of the enacting of the policies that we had in place at the time, or if it was even the language. But unfortunately, with us losing the election in the manner that we did, where we have no leverage as Democrats, no House, no Senate, no executive, And so it is going to be a consequence that we'll have to navigate, hopefully through the courts as Democrats, or hopefully by setting up infrastructure. So in 2 years, when it's that Senate race, we can have a clear, concise immigration policy that can uphold some of the ideas of due process and the ideas of if anybody come over here, they should have the same protections as folks who came over on the Mayflower, and some of those sentiments that come out of the sanctuary city language, but still have some clear pathway to citizenship for folks, and have some clear pathway to what are going to be the conditions in which folks are going to be pulled, whether it's high crimes, violent crimes, but what is that going to look like from a democratic perspective, if that's a direction that they should see fit to go.
Now, that's an interesting point that you put, because you said a lot there, especially with regards to identifying pathways to citizenship, making sure that we have secure borders. But I think when we look at Republicans, one of the things that they really went hard in on was the issues around immigration and crime, right? You had that issue that took place with Laken Riley. And then, of course, you had that unfortunate incident that had took place in New York with that migrant that ended up burning that homeless woman alive on the, these things sort of create shock and, shock value with a lot of Americans. And it's sort of one of those things that sort of keep individuals up. Now, I do have to say that historically and traditionally, the numbers statistically back this up, that immigrants that come to this country, they don't commit a lot of crime. I mean, those rates are low, but the concern is, okay, majority of people say, okay, I get that, I understand that, but I don't want anybody that's going to come over here and create more issue and burden the system more than it is. And so that's a concern. I also heard an argument earlier on that there was an argument that was being made by Democrats saying they, look, we don't want to break up the families, right? We don't want to take children away from their mothers and fathers away from their children's, vice versa, things of that particular nature. But the argument is that when individuals come to this country, they come illegal, therefore they're breaking the law. And of course, with American citizens, I've seen this happen, unfortunately, in within extended family members, when the mom may have committed a crime, and depending on the particular crime that was committed, a felony, that mother is going to jail, sometimes prison. And if there's nobody to take care of them, there's no big mama, there's no auntie, there's nobody there.
Split family.
That's a split family. That child was going into foster care. And so some of that concern is, are we making it so easy for undocumented migrants that we're forgetting about ourselves? And so there is a big concern with regards to the African community, African American community, and communities of color. Are we giving things up? And there's this, sort of unbalance. And I think that's another perspective that may come from, the conservative party, the GOP, those particular types of things. But I do agree with you.
But I've even heard Chicago residents in areas that are majority Democratic, with Mayor Brandon Johnson, Democratic mayor. But I've seen a lot of disapproval from him and his stance as a sanctuary city when it comes from African Americans in certain places in Chicago. I have seen that. But I would be interested to see the implications of the new Eric Adams pardon. Because, and I'm
Did you say Eric Adams pardon? The pardon?
I'm not gonna say pardon, but I believe the new DOJ stuff with Eric Adams.
Okay.
I believe it's a political consequence, being that he's working with Trump now. And so the DOJ is probably not gonna have those federal charges for him like they were when he talked about Biden in the past administration. And so I'm interested to see how he comes out, because he's still a Democrat. He's still a Democrat. But I want to see how the politics are played out in New York, where you have Holman with this aggressive thing, and then you have Eric Adams, who's trying to navigate, staying free or staying out,
right?
But also the politics of what's going on in New York. You
Right.
know, as far as New York is one of the most welcoming cities. That's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Ellis Island. That's where
Yep.
mostly everybody has come from. And
Yep.
so to see what's going to happen with immigration specifically between a national Republican government and state policies in New York that are Democratic, similar to Chicago, to see what happens with that tug of war.
Yeah, yeah, that is interesting. That you bring it up, and so that whole conversation going on with Eric Adams and Trump, and the whole pardon conversation.
Mhm.
That's interesting, and it's sort of not to sort of stay on this topic too long because we can go for days on some of this stuff. But it was kind of interesting. I think you know political leaders now, especially presidents,
Mhm.
are using. Some believe are misusing, abusing their pardoning powers. We saw what Biden did. Then, of course, Trump turns around and he pardons January 6th offenders, and it's a lot, and it's a lot to unpack there. And I think personally, it was a tit for tat.
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it's politics.
Yep.
The office comes with certain keys, and if I get the
Yep.
office, I'm gonna press those keys too.
Yeah,
And
yep.
so I don't. I just hate how the fact that it came out, whereas we could have been straight up like I'm a pardon
Yeah.
such and such. That's my family.
Right.
Whereas you going back on the word, and I can understand people's dismay with that. But at the end of the day, I think I've mentioned this already. If it was my son and I had the official capacity to do that, I would exercise that right.
Exactly. Especially when presidents do it for strangers.
Right.
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 And so part of me don't really understand why people are so confused
Mhm.
or so surprised by that. Because you're absolutely right. If I was a president and my son was looking at serious prison time, jail
Mhm.
time, those things that can really impact his life. I was just speaking with a gentleman here not too long ago talking about the invisible punishments
Mhm.
of incarceration. And if I can be a catalyst to ensure that didn't
Yeah,
happen to him,
yeah.
oh yeah,
It's in your legal right to
Eh,
exercise that.
exactly. I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a lot of conversation around Trump.
The January 6th people,
yeah,
for sure.
the January 6th individuals. And Trump's so-called stance on law and order, and how
Mhm.
can you pardon individuals that had abused or used force on law enforcement officers, things of that particular nature. And I think a lot of that was because Trump believed that those particular individuals were weaponized agents against him at the time. And so we know all about that particular conversation there. But getting back to that whole conversation around immigration, there's a lot that's going on there. Now we see Trump, sending these, worst of the worst to Gitmo, and those particular types of things. And I would say this, and I'm gonna say this, of course, Elvin, I've worked corrections
Yep.
for a long time,
Yep.
and part of my correctional career, I've worked with the Department of Homeland Security. I worked with ICE,
Mhm.
where we used to process individuals. We call them detainees.
Yep.
And so part of that whole conversation was quite interesting. And my whole presence of being there was really interesting because, just like you said, a lot of these individuals really come over to this country to seek a better life.
Mhm.
They really do.
Mhm.
I don't think that they come to this country to create chaos and foolishness and things of that particular nature. They want a better life. But we have a structure in place to ensure that if you want to come over, you come over exercising the authority through the asylum process. And I think that's part of the issue that we need to fix. I think that we do need to explore pathways to citizenship.
Mhm.
I think but we have to take some of the bureaucratic red tape out of that particular process to allow individuals the opportunity to come over here. And the reason why I'm so passionate about this is because I have a brother. He lived in Egypt for a while. He married an Egyptian citizen.
Mhm.
And this was like, a little bit after 9/11 had happened. He tried to come over. He couldn't even come over because Egypt was one of the countries that the United States had took issue with. There were
Okay.
some restrictions on that. And so his wife had to apply for citizenship or at least green card or visa in her home country and had to wait. And so that put a lot of pressure on us as a family because we wanted to see our family.
Right.
And here's the caveat. He had 2 children that were born here in the United States. And so they have birthright citizenship, but they're not going to leave their mom in Egypt to come over here while she's still waiting for. So there needs to be a process in an effort to, number one, secure borders, but number two, sort of fast track those individuals that have been vetted to be able to come to the United States. And so I just think that that's something that definitely needs to happen.
You think the approach that Holman and Trump is taking is going to get us there expeditiously or work us towards that end? Is that something on their radar?
I think if anything, what it's going to do is going to create a national conversation where we need to be able to talk about these things. I do know that other countries, when it comes to their immigration process, they're doing the same thing that Trump is doing, basically having them apply for citizenship in their home country, and in an effort to come to the other countries. These are like European countries that I'm talking about at this point in time.
I think a national discourse without the divisiveness that comes around all of our subjects in politics right now is necessary.
Right.
And I hope, even though it's crazy calamities that we discuss these issues over, but I hope we can get to a place where we can have those conversations in the mainstream and across, across our neighborhoods and the community to kind of get some real conversation started on real immigration policy and how it can be beneficial for the country and for folks seeking asylum here too.
And you're absolutely right, Elvin, because I think that's what's missing from this conversation. And I think that when you and I are talking, we're having a good conversation. We're sharing different perspectives on what's going on with that particular national conversation. I think that social media, if anything, has really sort of ruined that. I think individuals have been able to, historically now over the past 10 years, have been able to chime into their favorite social media platform and see people sort of speak to their own ideas and their same opinions, right? Create this community. And then when people say something different, they lash out. Right. Well, what does that do for the other person? That doesn't encourage the person to speak their mind.
Absolutely.
They tend to go underground. And so we can still have, so I think that, to your point, we definitely need to be able to have that. I think that's missing in today's conversation. I think that's missing in today's politics. The moderate man is dead. The moderate is dead.
It is. It's so extreme, but it's also a gateway because people ain't watching CNN and MSNBC. They watching the Oneal perspective. They're watching local people they know with real perspectives, with professional backgrounds and personal stories that they can relate to.
Right.
And so it is creating a lane. It's creating a lane for alternative media because I know what I'm gonna get when I turn to one of these channels, whether it's MSNBN, MSNBC, or Fox. I know what I'm gonna get.
Right.
But when you watch some of these podcasts, when you watch some of your friends and the productions they put together, local stuff, you get real perspectives from people who ain't sounding like the people who are paid millions of dollars on cable TV.
Right, exactly. And that's one of the great things, and I'll be quite honest with you, man. I know you and I have been talking about doing podcasts for a while, having these particular conversations. And, man, and part of the reason why I wanted to do this was because, to be truthful with you, I just really got tired of yelling at the TV. All right? I did, man. I got tired of yelling at the TV.
There's millions of us.
Millions of us yelling at the TV. And then I graduated from the TV, and then I went out to go speak to my wife, right? And my wife, she like her reality TV. And I always like to come in, after I have a cigar from outside, come in, and I want to talk politics with my wife.
What you think about that?
Yeah, and finally my wife's like, no, don't get time. Don't come talk to me about that right now. And I finally said, man, I need an outlet. Okay, I need something that I can voice my concerns, speak my piece, and be able to have other people that share their perspectives, and hence this was born. And, you and I talked about this, for a while.
Necessary.
Yeah,
so necessary.
It's so necessary, man.
That's all for today's episode of The Oneal Perspective, Politics, Power, and Policy. I hope you learned something new, got inspired, and maybe had a little fun along the way. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and join us next time for more thought-provoking conversations. Until then, stay informed and stay empowered.